Welcome to Kernels of Truth, brought to you by Progress Kentucky. Thanks so much for joining us to discuss the breaking Kentucky political news of the week. We've got Governor Beshear taking executive action on a couple of things, a couple of really important issues here in the state. And we're going to get a legislative update from Lexington's own Representative Chad Aull. He is already here. We're going to have a little bit of an abbreviated show tonight, but Representative Aull, are you here with us?
I'm here and I'm ready. Let's go.
All right, let's do this thing. I think the first thing that's interesting is let's go to Aaron's question about the best bills. Yeah,
best bills, bad bills. We can do all kinds of bills.
Right. Yeah, let's talk about those.
As folks maybe know, we have launched a poll, worst bills of the legislative session. We've been putting that out there, and we want people to help us pick. We've narrowed it down to 10, the top 10 worst bills. But we thought it would be fun for you to have the traumatic experience of walking back through those bills.
Relive all the worst, right? The worst. That's right.
And offer your kind of insights there.
Sure.
So we appreciate you being a good sport and checking these out. So the first one we're going to start with is HB 5, which is of course the called the Safer Kentucky Act. AKA the Incarcerate Kentucky Act,
or Representative Raymond called it the Suffer Kentucky Act. She named that on the House floor.
Yeah. So what's your take on that bill?
Well, it was horrible. I voted against it. I think at least twice, if not three times, because it went over to the Senate. They tinkered with it. It came back, and then the governor vetoed it, and then it came back again. And so, I voted against it every time. I mean, it's horrible. I understand that a lot of people like to run on and say they're tough on crime. They want to have that line or that slogan when they go back home and, pump their fist and pound on the desk that they're tough on crime. But the fact of the matter is that, when we're talking about this bill, we're talking about picking on people in our society who need the most help. There's provisions within House Bill 5 that criminalizes homelessness, whether they want to admit it or not. The Catholic Conference of Kentucky agreed. Several leading people that work with that community and those people who are on the verge of homelessness or are homelessness agreed. This is not going to do anything to solve the root cause of people in those situations. And so it picks on those among us who have the least, and it burdens a system that is already stretched to its limits in every way possible. And the fiscal note is believed to be long-term around $1 billion. It's something we can't afford as a commonwealth. It's not the right thing for our people. So, it clearly is one of the worst bills that we passed this last session. Would be a bad bill in any session. I don't think it's the worst bill. Just, previewing here my vote. But I do think it's in the top 10 easy of one of the worst bills we passed last session.
Yeah, I did. It's always amazing to me the kind of like fiscal conservative, super majority, didn't even seem to bat an eye about the real cost of this bill and didn't seem to take it very seriously.
They're only fiscally conservative when it meets their narrative. And this bill did not meet that narrative, so they didn't want to talk about that aspect.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, so the next one we have is SB 20. Which I think allows for kind of more juveniles to be incarcerated for longer periods of time. Again, this gets to that kind of, tough on crime, fear of, crime.
I mean, it's a lot of the same themes as House Bill 5 without the, criminalizing homelessness. It's folks that are taking advantage of the system and the opportunity because they want to go home and say they're tough on crime. And it does nothing to get to the root cause of why these kids are acting out, or what is the root cause of the situation that we need to be resolving as a society to get in and see what we can do to help these folks. And so there was no benefit or reason from passing that bill. I actually went back when you sent the list over and looked at some of the votes, and this is a bill, that got bipartisan opposition. There was several members of the majority party that voted against this bill because they saw that its long-term implications is not the right direction or the need for the Commonwealth. It's really perplexing or disappointing. You look at, as a few as 6 or 8, 10 years ago, there was really a bipartisan push in Kentucky around criminal justice reform, and especially in the juvenile justice space, on how to revamp our system, how to push people into rehab and try to get people out of the system and to make them a productive member of society. And we've totally lost that focus and swung back the other way. And now we're crime and punishment and throwing away the book and putting people back into the system. And it's just not something that is going to help us long term in our Commonwealth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. And then HB 2, which of course became Amendment 2, and is now being taken to the voters. This is very clearly because, you know, the voucher agenda keeps getting hung up by, you know, judicial rulings that say you can't actually do.
You mean
this.
The Constitution? You get hung up by the Constitution.
There's some very clear.
It's pretty clear that our founders like the idea of common schools, which are public schools. And that's why, if you read the constitutional amendment, it goes into all of these different provisions multiple times and talks about the number of places it has to change the Constitution. Because the founders of the Commonwealth, the people who wrote the Constitution, valued public education. And to me, I voted in your poll. I picked this one. And I picked this one because I truly believe that public education is the great equalizer. It's the foundation of our society. It's what sets us apart as a country and as a Commonwealth. And it gives everybody the same opportunity to live, thrive, learn, and advance. If you work hard, if you study, you can go to a good school, you can make your way, you can earn a living and a wage, and it puts us all on the same playing field. And what we're doing here, what the legislature is doing here, is they're tired of getting beat. And so they're going to try to do an end around and have the voters say it's okay to take taxpayer money, our taxpayer money, and give it to for-profit private schools. It's not right, and it's going to fail. It's going to fail just like the other Constitutional Amendment 2 failed a couple of years ago, and this is going to fail this time because people aren't going to be fooled. And I think this is truly the worst piece of legislation that we passed last session. If the voters of the Commonwealth do not see it for what it is, which is a scam to help people pay for private school.
Amen, Rep. Aull. Yeah, for sure. I definitely feel like, you know, this is one where it's horrible legislation, but it does have that out because we as the voters get to it's
on us.
It's
on us. And I know you're going to have a call to action. That would be my call to action, is like, you know, all the progressive stuff, all the things that most of your viewers and that we all want for our Commonwealth, for our kids, for the next generation. If this goes through, it's going to decimate public schools. It's going to really gut them. I mean, we're having a hard time already in a lot of these places getting people, you know, a living wage. We're having a tough time finding substitutes. We're having a hard time finding school bus drivers, cafeteria workers. We're having a tough time keeping educators in the classroom because they can't provide for their families. And it's a hard thing. You know, people go into that line of work because they want to do it. They love kids. They love teaching. They love the profession. They go into it because they have a calling. You have to have a calling to want to go into that line of work. But when you can't provide for your family, you've got to make a hard decision. And we're going to make it harder if we take a huge amount of our taxpayer funds and start to siphon it off to private schools. And so we're going to go the way of other states if it passes. So it's on us. It's on the collective us to get out there like we've done in the past and mobilize in places that necessarily don't vote for other progressive causes. They'll vote for this if they know exactly what it's about.
Oh, absolutely. And I saw they launched a campaign to kind of push back on it. They did it not in Lexington or Louisville. They did it in a rural district, you know, that really relies on the
Hazard, Perry County.
Yeah, so I think smart move on that front for sure. Put this, you know, squarely in the communities it's going to affect the most for sure. All right, and then we got SB 16. This is an ag gag bill. This is to let agriculture companies hide their operations from the public. No drones overhead. Make it a crime to fly a drone over an agricultural operation. It didn't go a lot.
It went further than that. I actually spoke about this one I spoke about most of these on forum, but I actually kind of took a lead somewhat in the caucus on this bill. I grew up on a farm. I'm a former state FFA officer. My family raises cows, runs horses. So, I'm an ag kid at heart. I love agriculture. I love the Commonwealth of Kentucky and its role in the ag community. But the biggest problem with this bill was the way it was written. I think most people can understand the stated intent. Like, if you have a drone and you don't have permission to fly over somebody else's property, you should not be filming what's happening on that property with a drone if you don't have permission. Whether you're for that or against it, we can have that argument, but that was the stated intent of the bill. The problem was, if you read the bill, there was a series of provisions. And instead of saying "or" in those series of provisions, it said "and." And so the way it was written would also criminalize a worker or a visitor to one of those facilities or a plant if they happen to have a cell phone on their person that was recording able. And so that's really what we got. That's what, the caucus and attorneys and workers' rights folks, union reps that really got hung up on, is because we've had some unfortunate incidents, both in Kentucky and across the country, where some facilities were not following OSHA regulations. And in that situation, one of the workers was able to film that situation and get it out to some folks, and it triggered some remedies. And so, the provision of that bill was written incorrectly. So I offered an amendment on the House floor that would have fixed that provision with the help of some attorneys, and they wouldn't even go along with that correction of that mistake of the "and" and the "or." And we know they have a history of writing these bills incorrectly, wrong, and rushing. We had a bill a couple of years ago, Senate Bill 150, that they had incorrect on the "and" and the "or," and it went to the court, and they got burnt on how they wrote the legislation. So it's really important with critical big pieces of big bills like that one, to get the "and" and the "or" and the conjunctions correct, and they didn't. And so the way it was written, it really went much further than people would realize on the surface.
Gotcha. So yeah, maybe there's a court case in there somewhere because of their inability to write clear and precise legislation. All right, so moving on, HB 18. This is, of course, the one where Lexington and Louisville first, and Lexington, wanted to end discrimination, kind of housing discrimination in terms of where people got their money from, right? So this would basically force those local rules to be no longer applicable and protect discrimination, and landlords can then refuse to rent to tenants who pay with public housing assistance. This, of course, became a law despite a veto from Governor Beshear. Any thoughts on HB 18?
Yeah, I just think it's sad that we want to focus on, again, picking on people who are the least among us. It should not matter where people get their funds or their resources from. If they're able to pay for their rent, allow it to go through. Louisville had passed this at the local level several years ago and had no problems with it. It was actually working pretty well. Folks in Louisville were upset that they were taking this tool away from them. So this was a proactive measure by the General Assembly, because Lexington was going to go the same way of Louisville. And this really comes down to local control. It's a theme that our General Assembly over the last 4 to 6 years is attacking both Louisville mostly, and then Lexington some, with us not being able to, at the local level, make our own decisions on how we want to govern. And so if Lexington or Louisville passes a progressive piece of a local ordinance, the legislature comes in and plays daddy and says, oh, no, you can't make that local decision, even though they'll decry it at another level. Well, it's local control. Well, it's not. The narrative only fits for them when they want it to fit.
Yeah, conveniently. It's not really so much an actual belief. It's just a convenient argument.
It's a talking point when it works.
Yeah. SB 2, this would allow guardians, I think veterans and others to come into schools and to bring guns in. This is one that I think Moms Demand Action and others were really opposed to, and but of course became the law of the land. Any thoughts on SB 2?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things we can do to make our schools safer. I voted against the bill. I don't think this is the right way to go. I don't think we make our schools safer by introducing more guns in our schools. If we want to make our schools safer, we need to invest in technology. There's a lot of really new technology out there around alarms, doors, mechanisms, and how to get in, how to lock them down quicker, and how to open them up. And there's a lot of really interesting stuff that we could do. We could take that same money that we're going to spend here and spend it on investing in our schools and our technology to make them safer. But I don't think putting more guns in schools with folks, I don't think that's the right answer.
Yeah, I mean, obviously these are not law professionals. These are just nice folks from the community that want to be there to be helpful. It just seems problematic. Moving on, HB 1, HB 6, SB 91. These are all kind of the bills that are working to change Kentucky's tax system. We really going full tilt into the Kansas disaster, continuing the trajectory of decreasing income taxes to zero, and then funding for critical programs to dry up, basically. Thoughts on those?
Yeah, I thought it was both interesting and disingenuous for them to break up the bills like they broke them up. So, when they broke up House Bill 6 and House Bill 1, they said they were only going to put reoccurring expenses in House Bill 6, and they were only going to put one-time expenditures in House Bill 1. And if you looked into it further and further and further, that wasn't always the case. Like, that sounds and makes sense to the common person on the surface if that's what, in fact, and indeed you're going to do, but it wasn't. And the reason I voted against House Bill 6, I did not vote against House Bill 1, but I voted against House Bill 6, even though it had some great things in it. It did. But at the end of the day, we are focused on a priority as a legislative body to hit these artificial triggers that allows us to lower the income tax in Kentucky. And the legislative leadership has already come out and said that barring something unforeseen happening in the next couple of months, they think we're going to hit the trigger to go down another 0.5%. And that's okay for now because we're in a good time economically, even though inflation is rampant and affecting people, in their pocketbook. But the economy, the fundamentals of the economy, at least from a budget standpoint, we're in pretty good shape right now. The first time we hit a recession, we're going to turn around because there's no triggers to take the taxes back up. It's only triggers to take the taxes down, which I think everybody's like, yeah, that'd be great in an ideal society if we were paying for everything that we needed to already be paying for, but we're not. And we haven't been for a long time. And we put a decent amount of money in how we pay for teachers and all that stuff. We put a big chunk in there. But if you go back to the recession, we're not back to that 2007, 2008 level when you account for inflation. We've got a long way to go. We need a lot of sessions of putting more money into the public schools to get it back to where it needs to be, just to get back to that 2007 level. So we're a long way away from where we want to be, or where I would like us to be, before we could start about permanently long-term cutting taxes. And roughly 40% of our entire state budget comes from those income taxes. And I'm just very concerned, and I think other members of the General Assembly are very concerned, what happens when we get into a recession. When we look around and we don't have 40% of our income, what are we going to cut then? Because we're going to have to cut. Is it going to be public education? Is it going to be the University of Kentucky? Is it going to be our state police and our state prisons? What are we going to cut? We're going to have to make some really deep cuts when that happens.
Well, and there's so much that they kind of opportunities they ignored and real needs that were ignored because that wouldn't let them hit these, kind of artificial targets, right? So
Yeah.
the housing crisis, or not the childcare crisis, that seems very clear that that's looming. A lot of childcare, because there was no longer the federal funds to support these folks. We're gonna be in a real tough spot when people start having to close their doors because they just don't have the the revenue to support that childcare, which is so critical for our economy continuing to do okay. So yeah, I really good points on these. Thank you so much for sharing your views on them. The next one is this HB 136, which I believe was actually introduced by somebody who works for a company that is a polluter, and then made sure that they as long as polluters were kind of taking claiming their problems, right? So when they would self-police, then they wouldn't actually get the fines or the penalties. It was very interesting, and it seemed very self-dealing on all sorts of levels, but the ethics folks said it was okay, so he went forward with this one. Any thoughts on HB 136?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke against it on the House floor. I think Louisville is in this space and had that body and that regulation set up because it has a history of pollution and needing to have the extra oversight. And it's been working. Like, it's been working for a long time. It's gotten a lot better. You don't hear the stories of Rubber Town and all the pollution that we used to have in the air. And I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's certainly much better. And so I thought that bill was unnecessary. I thought it was going to hurt Louisville. It was going to hurt our quality of air. And I think long term, Louisville's an economic engine for the Commonwealth. And by doing this, I think it's going to hurt, long term, it starts to affect the quality of air, then it's going to affect the quality of life, then it's going to affect our ability to attract and retain corporations and jobs, and it's going to affect our economy. So I thought the trickle down effect of that bill long term were really bad, and it set a precedent again. Legislature coming in, overriding local. We just did not need to get involved in that space because it was working.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point for sure. It's like if there's nothing broke, what are we doing here? All right, and then we got two more on our top 10. HB 174, which provides parental access to kind of minors' health records. It's a violation of HIPAA, apparently. I'm not super familiar with this one, so I'm not going to pretend to be. But any thoughts on this bill?
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, I worked at the University of Kentucky for a long time in the healthcare department and IT. I was a part of the EPIC implementation, and I'm pretty intimately aware of the health information management systems at UK and other big healthcare facilities. And the reason it's set up like this at most places because when a minor gets to a certain age, they can then still grant permission to their parents, and 98% of those will. But there are certain circumstances that we're unaware of. We can never, all of us, understand everybody's individual situation that they may be facing at home. But in that one situation, that minor may need to have that information become private for a reason. And that's what that bill took away. It put it on all of it on the parent, and it took away the minor's voice when they hit that age trigger. And I think the age trigger is like 13 or 14, but it took away that trigger. So there's some people that, we've heard some really horrific stories in that space of, minors and very rough home situations. Hadley had the very public, was very brave with sharing her story of being raped by her stepfather during the governor's campaign. And Are you going to make her allow her stepfather still to be having access to her medical record and him make that decision, or should it be her decision? And that's really what this came down to.
Yeah. Yeah, Hadley Duvall, really, really amazing woman, young woman. We're actually going to have her on the show in a few weeks. Really excited to have that conversation. All right, so one last one, and you already told everyone what your worst is. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and tell everyone I think this is the worst one. This is SB 349, which is the Coal Protection Act, adding a whole new bureaucracy to stop utilities from closing coal plants. There already is a bureaucracy to manage utilities and support utilities to make sure that ratepayers are getting the best possible deal and that they're moving forward, managing their power systems in the best way for our state. Now they're like, well, we don't really trust that group. We're going to create a new one that's stacked with, actual coal and natural gas industry people to make sure they can veto, when the actual utilities themselves are saying these things are too expensive. It's cheaper for us to move to renewable energy or other energy sources. This is going to be one more chance to kind of put coal over the best interests of our commonwealth. So yeah, any thoughts on that one?
Horrible bill, right? Yes, horrible bill. Check. But I tell you, I think the thing that was really interesting with this bill was the divide of the people who are always usually lockstep trying to pass all these other really bad bills. They were really split on this one, and the lobbying and the interest and the amount of calls and emails and letters from, liberty organizations and anti-tax and local control and freedom groups. They were all across the board on this one. And so there was a huge wave at the beginning of chambers and other people who were against this bill. And then you could tell that the momentum was on the side of all of the interests that were against it. So all of a sudden, then you got a huge wave of people that were for this, like new organizations, new groups that were stood up just for the purpose of passing this bill with some fancy name. So the lobbying perspective on this bill was really interesting from a legislative perspective, because usually you get all these same people singing from the same hymnal trying to pass sometimes bad pieces of legislation. This time they were really split. It was interesting to, eat popcorn and see that fight between them on this, it's like, it's interesting to see all these people fighting each other that are usually all together.
I think this was the most expensive bill in terms of like how much money was spent fighting it. And, this was, of course, a session that, again, set a record, I think, in how much money was spent, but that this one actually triggered a lot more expenditures than, you necessarily.
Now, I know we talked about a lot of bad bills. And look, we pass plenty of bad bills, but I do want to say we passed a few decent things.
Oh, good. Let's end with some hope. What do you got?
Yes. So House Bill 258, which was the animal abuse bill, made animal abuse for dogs and cats a Class D felony. We have been trying to get something passed in that space for a decade. It finally passed. House Bill 115 eliminated copay for high-risk diagnostic breast cancer cases. Great bill. House Bill 52 required health plans to cover preventative cancer screenings. Great bill. Senate Bill 74, the Momnibus bill. All kinds of great stuff chalked into Senate Bill 74, including if you get pregnant, that being the first time ever, a qualifying life condition to then update and get health insurance. Great bill. Senate Bill 111 eliminates some insurance limits on speech therapy. Michael Kilgickrist, the former basketball player of UK, came and lobbied and spoke and helped get that bill passed. So, folks, we passed plenty of bad bills, but it's not all doom and gloom. There are some good things that we do work across the aisle, very bipartisanly, to make those. The Momnibus, a lot of credit's got to go out to our legislative colleagues, mostly female, on both the Republican and Democrat side, for working together across the aisle in a bipartisan manner to get that bill passed. Really great bill that, hats off to a lot of people. But there were some good things that got passed.
Yeah, we'll give you that for sure. And then we watched the omnibus like every step of the way. We report on that again and again and again because it did seem like it's like, oh yay, great, whoa.
Oh yeah, up and down, right?
There
Roller coaster.
there's up and downs along the route on that one for sure.
Yeah.
Also, it seems like the key thing to get any democratic laws passed is for you to give them over to a Republican to take and run with. But I'm sure a lot of
part of the omnibus, that piece that I talked about with the qualifying. If you get pregnant, becoming a qualifying health event, that was absolutely Representative Stalker's bill last session. So you introduced it. She got a lot of interest, got a hearing, and kept working it over the summer, met with Chairman Mosier. And to her credit, Chairman Mosier put it in this bill, and they worked together and got it passed. So, in the minority, sometimes you just got to be okay with letting your bill get sucked up into another bill and getting passed. And that's all right. It's hard in the minority to get a bill passed clean through and on your own. It happens, but not very often.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your insights on those bills and adding some hope. I know that Nema has a question to kind of close out the interview. And again, thank you so much for being so generous with your time.
Yeah.
So you kind of were talking about it just a few seconds ago, which not all things were bad. So tell us some of the things that we can maybe look towards that you guys, the Democrats, might be pushing out during the off-session meetings, and what you guys are going to be looking for in the upcoming session.
Yeah, I think you're always looking for bills that you can float that have bipartisan support, that you can find a colleague across the aisle to work on to get stuff done. I had a bill last session, House Bill 189. It did not get a hearing. It did not pass, but it's in the food space for school lunches. So without spending 5 minutes on telling you how it works, the basis is it sets up a fund in the state of Kentucky that incentivizes local school districts to buy locally sourced Kentucky proud agricultural products. It's a win for our farmers. It's a win for our school districts. It's a win for our kids. And so when you work on pieces of legislation like that, you're bringing in farmers, you're bringing in rural Kentucky, you can work across the aisle. I was able to get 19 Republican co-sponsors signed up on that bill last session. So when you find bills like that, I think you can work across the aisle to get stuff done. I worked with Representative Killian Timothy the session before on an SRO bill that was really critical for Fayette County to fix an issue that Sheriff Kathy Witt had came upon when she was working in that space. And so I think you're going to find, as far as bills that Democrats are working on, you're going to hear a lot about reproductive health care. Representative Burke has been a leader in that space with her personal story. It has proven out to be, they're going too far. They're coming on to, they're starting to talk about IUDs and other birth controls, in other states that are starting to theorizing about taking away. You've seen what happened with the Alabama case with invertebrate fertilization. So I think there's a lot of momentum and a lot of positives for our party and our legislative members at working on reproductive health care. Workers' rights is something that we're always working on. We're always talking to our union brothers and sisters about any kind of bills in that space. Raising the minimum wage. Sometimes we offer bills that raise the minimum wage. Some statewide, we had a bill this last session that offered local municipalities the option to raise the minimum wage, because Lexington had raised the minimum wage here locally, went to the Supreme Court in Kentucky a few years ago, was ruled unconstitutional. So this bill would fix that and to allow local municipalities to raise their minimum wage if they want. I think those are the kind of things that you're going to see the Democratic caucus in Frankfort work on in the interim.
That's great.
Yep, very cool.
Well, thanks again. I think we're gonna let you get back to your evening and take our thanks with you. And then, I know that you're an active member of the kind of Democratic community. You're out there. You're showing up at meetings. You're sharing your kind of perspective with as many folks as possible. And I just want to say thank you for your leadership in that space. You're not somebody who just does the job in Frankfort and then goes goes back and goes home. You're out in the community constantly, which I think is really valuable. People need to know, kind of like connect those dots about what's happening in Frankfort and how we can make things a bit better up there. So appreciate your.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate what y'all are doing, and keep up the good fight. We need people in it. The public space and the public arena is not just for elected officials. It's for everybody. It's for the advocates. It's for the mom. It's for everybody. So we need all of you all and all of your listeners in the good fight. And I know we get tired of getting beat on this thing or that thing, but don't lose heart. Don't give up. I do think it's going to be a while. We're not going to wake up tomorrow and be in the majority. We've got a hill, maybe a mountain to climb, but we got to climb it. We can't stop because we're already on that first cliff. And if we start now, we're going to stop and fall down. And, I don't want to hit the bottom. So the only way up is keep going up. We're going to keep going, and I need y'all to keep coming with us.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thanks again. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and acknowledge it right here, right now. I had the worst, technical, they shouldn't let me produce. Our regular producers were not available. So we've done a great show, but when I hit go live, I only hit it once, and apparently you need to hit it twice, because why not? And so we had a nice news of the week segment. We had a nice intro. We shared some protest signs. Had another whole question from Representative Aull, which he answered. So I'm just going to apologize because I think there's good content that was missed, and it was really just shared with the four of us. And that was. I'm going to hold it dear. I think it's special, but I feel like it would have been better if the world saw it.
It was a well done show and a lot of good information.
Absolutely.
Let's do, because we do have a call to action. We have two news stories. So if you don't mind, we'll do it as quick as we can. We'll we'll go back to news of the week. We'll just do the two stories about what Andy was up to. Is that cool with y'all?
Yes.
Awesome. Let's do it. Woohoo!
Well, I'll be brief. The lead story for me was the fact that June 19th, has been made a state holiday by executive order by this governor. And not only that, he's also outlawed discrimination insofar as different ethnic hairstyles and in the workplace in this commonwealth. Both of those are very big milestones in terms of racial equality, I wouldn't say radical steps, but he did something that the legislature did not and would not do.
Awesome. And you're a historian, right? So the Juneteenth, the history of Juneteenth.
Oh, yes.
What's the quick snapshot of that?
June 19th, 1865 is when folks in Galveston, Texas found out that the war was over and that they were free. And since that time, African Americans, not only in Texas, but throughout the country, have celebrated Juneteenth. But in this part of the state where I am in Western Kentucky, we celebrate it too. And the country celebrates it too as a result of the legislation signed by President Biden. But in this part of the state, we also celebrate the 8th of August. So these are days in which we celebrate freedom, not just for African Americans, yes, for African Americans, but freedom from the whole country, where that big 800-pound elephant in the room that was dodged in 1776, 1787, the issue of slavery was put off, led to the Great Civil War. Well, we're now celebrating the wholeness that freedom has brought.
And I love the kind of Juneteenth story because it wasn't okay, well, this was a Galveston story, but that was, I think they were kind of the last to know why we're kind of, but every community had their own date of when when they were told, when they learned that they were free, right? Because it wasn't like now we can't just, send out a press release and all the news stories, the news channels pick it up. So it took a minute for people to figure it out and to get that information out there. So I love that, it's now something we're celebrating nationwide. I'm glad that Andy Beshear, did that thing. Of course, we can't let the GOP super duper majority off the hook because, Senator Neal had a bill to recognize Juneteenth as a state holiday, and it did not get a hearing, shockingly. Right.
Right.
I don't know.
Look at my shock face.
Right. What? They did something racist? No. So and in in honor of our dear sister Kimberly, who's not here tonight, who had a conflict, she just puts it out there very clearly. She's like, no, Kentucky is a racist state. She just says it plainly. I am not one to argue with her on that issue. I feel like her life experience, her lived experience, is going to tell her something that's not mine, that mine won't. But I think this administration or this General Assembly just keeps showing you again and again and again, whether it's rolling back DEI rules, whether it's, ignoring opportunities to set the record straight. And I know, Nema, you've got a good story to kind of, again, show that Andy's heart is in the right place. His head is in the right place. And he's doing what he can.
Yeah. Just going back to what we were talking about, he also, when he passed the Juneteenth executive order, he also did the Crown Act, which was touched on a little bit. And the Crown Act, has been, it basically keeps people from being discriminated against in the workplace or any other place for their hair. And, this might sound crazy to us white people. So I'm going to say this, like, it's not real. I mean, it's a good thing that this passed, because, I think a lot of white people are like, oh my gosh, I just don't understand what the deal is. It's just hair. Listen, this is a great thing. We hear about it all the time in public schools where people are being sent home for their hair. And it's just one of those things that we just don't need to discriminate people over. And so thankfully, Andy signed in the executive order to make this happen. We know Representative Attica Scott was really out in front of this when she was serving in the legislature. And so I'm glad to finally see it go and really pass, because this is so necessary. And as I had said earlier, this is what ran Whitney Westerfield out of office. His inability to even get his Senate colleagues to even entertain this bill. And so at least, that's the rumor. And I can see that sadly being the reason. So, but it got through now.
And Whitney Westerfield, has, I think, Black kids that he's adopted, or like, yes. So, it hit him like very personally, I think, in a way that, his Republican colleagues couldn't all, see eye to eye with or whatever. But he seemed like he was very frustrated by a lot of things that were happening in his super majority, for sure. But that'd be interesting to get his perspective. I wonder if he'd get on this show. I wonder if he'd just tell the truth about like what he's gone through. We have had Republicans on the show once, I know, at least. So we should do it again.
Yeah, it would be really interesting. I'm sure it was very frustrating, but it's like it shouldn't just happen to be. It just shouldn't happen to your child for you to really care about it, though. But I'm glad that he did, and I'm also kind of glad that he saw who he's been hanging out with for a few years now. And I guess, that's a hard pill to swallow. So Godspeed to him. But yeah, it's about time. I'm very pleased to see this. Yep.
For sure. Absolutely. And again, it's like they had all sorts of chances. Attica Scott was a very strong leader on this. A number of other folks who, are no longer in the legislature were working really hard to get this done. I think Representative Booker was also, somebody who's really an advocate of this and moving it forward. And, they just wouldn't. They just absolutely wouldn't move it. So, all right. I think those are the news stories we're going to cover, and then I think we're going to do our call to action, and then we'll close it out. So maybe a quick show for folks this week. But who's got the call to action?
I think it's the good doctor.
Let me see. I believe that I do. And hopefully my battery will not die. Call the legislative comment line, 1-800-372-7181. Our first call to action is from the League of Women Voters.
I think that might be, Dr. Clardy, I think that might be an old call to action. So I think we're at... and actually, I think we had Nema doing it. So I don't like. I'm looking right at my script, and that's what I see. So, well. Can I issue my own call to action? If you like. Why not? Let's do it.
All right. My call to action here again, as I've said many times on this show, is to call upon the Kentucky Democratic Party and its leaders to make reproductive rights a major issue in the 2024 campaign.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. For sure. every single Democrat running for office needs to make sure that's a very clear contrast on that very critical issue. And like I said, we're gonna have Hadley Duval, the young woman who was in the very powerful ad for Governor Beshear. She'll be on the show in a couple of weeks, and I think she's available. She'll help put the kind of the real gravity of this issue right there in front of you, for sure, for voters. All right, but there's one other call to action that I really gotta plug, because we have this poll, as we just heard, and that's so we want to make sure everyone votes. We got to get at least 100 responses on this poll so we can tell everyone what the worst bill of the legislature was as decided by the people. You heard Representative Aull. His answer is Amendment 2, or the House Bill 2 that became Amendment 2 on the using public funds for private schools. My own is the Coal Protection Act. I think that's the worst one, but there's so many to choose from. Go head to it right now. We've got the bit.ly link, so folks can just go ahead and vote on the worst of the worst. And we want at least 100 responses before we tell the world what happened. And it's just really important because you got to connect the dots for people, right? We're not going to get better policy unless we get better politicians. If we want better legislative outcomes from the General Assembly, we need to hold them accountable for the bad bills that they're passing with impunity. So yeah, get out there and vote. That's all I'm saying. Please do it now. It only takes a minute. You've already thought about it because you had the conversation, heard our conversation with Representative Aull. All right.
So, we're closing now? Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's get out of here.
Yeah.
Listen, first of all, thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Nema. Thank you, Representative Chad Aull. And thank all of you for listening to our conversation and being part of the larger conversation as we continue to turn Kentucky purple and hopefully one day a solid blue. Progress Kentucky is a nonprofit organization registered with the Kentucky Secretary of State and organized as a 501c4 organization. We are affiliated with the Indivisible Project, the Commonwealth Alliance for Voter Engagement, and are also proud members of the Forward Kentucky Network. Progress Kentucky's goal is to educate, organize, increase voter turnout, and advance a progressive agenda through civic engagement. If you're interested in getting involved with Progress Kentucky, we are looking for 3 new board members to join our legislative Freudian slip, our leadership team. If you have a passion for a better Kentucky and want to roll up your sleeves and get to work with us, shoot an email to info@progresskentucky.org. We are looking especially forward to folks who are willing to knock on doors and who have knocked on doors, make calls for candidates, and who have a commitment to the long-term work of building the new Kentucky majority. Join us next week for another informative show. We will be joined by Blair Hayden, Executive Director of Emerge Kentucky, an amazing group of progressive women running for office up and down the ballot all throughout the Commonwealth and are winning and will continue to do so. Episode 163 was excellently produced by our host, Aaron. Big thanks to Nate Orshon, who wrote and performed our theme songs. You can find out more information at natosongs.com. If you miss our weekly live stream on Facebook or YouTube, audio podcasts of our show are available on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. If you do listen to the pod, leave us a 5-star wherever you're listening right now. Logo and some graphic content provided by Couchfire Media. More information can be found at couchfiremedia.com.
That was perfect.
Thank you.
Why is my sound not working? Oh, good God.
My gosh.
It's just not. They just don't let me do it anymore. All right. Well, I'll maybe drop the sound in here, or maybe I won't figure out how to do that. But
okay,
just, we're gonna leave it here because it couldn't get any worse. All right, you guys were
Thanks,
great.
Guys. Thanks
you all for a very good show.
Fantastic. Y'all have a great night.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.